Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth. Normally people say it's hard to know who to trust, but I think the obverse is true. It's easy to know who not to trust. For over 15 years, people like myself have been out here speaking to our people and speaking up for them. And we let you know from the jump who not to trust. These Negroes you've been seeing on white media cable are astroturf, not grassroots. The reason for this morning's briefing is to illustrate the point that bootlicks of a feather failed together. Now, let's just get to it. Kamala Harris raised $1 billion for her failed campaign, and where did all of that money wind up? Well, here's a few places. About $350,000 of it wound up with Roland Martin's New Vision Media. Pathetic. He's trying so desperately to get some quickie credibility, he uses a name that basically mimics what we call ourselves, the new black media. Except in this case, I think it's actually truth in advertising. After all, he calls his little company New Vision Media. Given his track record, he should have called it No Vision Media. But you know what else is missing? The word black is missing, but that makes sense. There ain't much black about his operation at all. Remember, I've told you for 15 years, a media is defined by who owns it, controls it, and whose interest it operates in. Those are three separate and distinct things, but unless a so-called black media entity has all three of those things in alignment, they're not black media at all. Roly claims he owns New Vision Media. Well, that right there means its black credibility is defective, but even if it wasn't, who pays for New Vision Media? White Democratic donors, that's who. And whose interest does New Vision Media operate in? The Democratic Party and their donors, not black people. But Roly wasn't alone. Al Sharpton also got thrown some cash by Kamala, $500,000 for his National Action Network, or as I call it, the Do Nothing Network. He did an interview with her that was the predictable sloppy kiss, which was the entire reason she paid him that money. Sharpton is a publicity hound. He's proven himself good at getting lots of headlines, mostly for himself. But he doesn't do anything for anyone else. And then there's the queen of mean, Oprah Winfrey. She believes in Kamala Harris, don't you know? That's why she was out there at those rallies. That's why she endorsed Kamala, right? Because that's what she said. She was speaking from conviction that Kamala was the right person to be president. She said that on principle. But apparently principle is expensive because Kamala had to give a cool $1 million to Oprah's Harpo Productions. $1 million. So, any of you shills, rubes, shea butter bootlicks, or tethers out there who gave your state mental health disability check to Kamala, this is where your donation wound up. Talk about money well spent. And I know my more seasoned listeners are saying, but Professor Truth, we know these guys are on the take. They're the usual suspects, Bootlicks Incorporated. Yes, and because they are the opposition, we have to point them out and make sure nobody sees them for anything other than the backstabbing sellouts they are. Now, what did Roly-Poly do with the money he got? Well, I guess we can all assume that half of it wound up at the buffet line at the Western Sizzlin', but the rest of it, he claims, was used for advertising. Say, does anyone remember seeing any Kamala Harris ads or Kamala anything from Roly-Poly? Any billboards, TV spots, radio spots, online banners, even a yard sign? Have you seen so much as a flyer taped to a utility pole? Me neither. Now remember, Roly's been whining and complaining nonstop that Democrats aren't winning elections because they don't have the right messaging. They got too many white people who are trying to do messaging for black voters, and that's not going to work. Why, these Democrats need to spend more money with black-owned outlets. But whenever he talks about black-owned outlets, he's only talking about himself. So he spent years griping at Democrats for not spending their campaign money with him. Bootlicks who have the pulse of the black voters, as he tells it. People like him who can influence those hard-to-reach young black voters. The under 50 crowd who the Democrats' white advisors and consultants have failed to reach. All this time, he's been talking like the Democrats have been ignoring him. Come to find out, he's been on the payroll the entire time. They've been spending money with him. And this was the result. The most lopsided political defeat in modern history. Kamala Harris wasted all that money on influencers who had no influence. She suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of an orange-skinned, twice-impeached insurrectionist convicted felon. So all that money that she gave, she might as well have bet it on the ponies. At least she would have gotten some kind of return on that investment. Roland Martin claims to have all these viewers and all this knowledge, and yet nobody listens to him. And clearly he doesn't know anything. So we see the black public treating him the same way that those white executives at CNN and MSNBC do. And the same thing goes for Al Sharpton. If it wasn't for MSNBC, he would probably be under a highway overpass somewhere with a sign, Or no doubt he'd be in front of a camera somewhere trying to get himself some attention on the nightly news. Whenever you hear me using phrases like civil rights retreads, it's people like Al Sharpton that I'm talking about. And as for Oprah, I think we all know that heifer doesn't return your phone calls unless you're dropping off a bag. She's been a self-interested mercenary her entire worthless life. These are the people who Kamala Harris ran to because they're politically reliable, dependable bootlicks, non-threatening to the white power structure. But they're also useless to white power at this point because a critical mass of black people have tuned them out. A lot of you wonder why it is that I dog Roly-Poly out so much. Why do I constantly on a near daily basis take shots at him? Because I don't want you to forget that this is who and what he is. One of the biggest problems we've had as a people is that we keep allowing these backstabbers and collaborators with white power to act against our interests, and then we let everyone forget that they did it. And even on the rare occasion when we call them out, we let them slither away, and then in time they come back having reinvented themselves. It's time to put the mark of Cain on these fools. Don't let anyone forget who they are and what they've done. Now, of course, while we can all be disgusted by these financial revelations, none of us is surprised by them. We knew these professional BS artists were getting paid. All that's changed is we know how much they've gotten paid in this case. And when someone has to be paid to endorse somebody, is that person operating from a place of conviction? Of course not. What kind of principle makes someone say, sure, I'll endorse you. I'll tell the black community nothing but glowing things about you, even though you have a 30-year track record of attacking the black community. I'll give you nothing but sloppy kisses on air, and I'll go ahead and sing your praises off air and tell the world the sun shines out of your backside and that you're our last hope. But first, you have to give me a bag. Oh yeah, I serve the black community, right, Roly? Ain't that what Roland and Al Sharpton say? They're speaking for the black community and that they're independent. That's Roly's favorite word. I'm independent. Independent. That's what Roland's always saying. Maybe I'm independent. Nobody can make him say what he doesn't want to say, right? But they can pay him to say what they want him to say. And don't kid yourself. The only reason he wasn't out there shilling for Trump is because the Trump campaign wouldn't pay him. And before we go any further, just keep in mind, these are the campaign contributions that Kamala reported. She's from California, and the California political machine is largely based on off-the-books cash donations. So how many other shills and bootlicks did she pay under the table or through other means to get out there and sell the soap for her? Now, as the black media, we are truly independent. We don't get one penny from the Democrats or any white liberals at all. We've been out here long before Roland Martin began selling what's left of his wretched little soul, and we'll still be here long after he's shuffled off to the buffet line, never to be seen again. But what's really ironic here is that Kamala Harris could have talked to people who actually do have the ear of younger black voters, and she could have talked to them for free. You see, the black media would have talked to Kamala Harris and wouldn't have charged her a dime. But what we would have charged her is honesty, and that's the problem, isn't it? Kamala Harris wasn't looking to do interviews. She wasn't looking to get her name out there. She was looking for people who would be auxiliaries for her campaign. She wanted cheerleaders, not questions. And she knows the black media doesn't cheerlead for anyone other than the black community, who are exactly the people that she most wants to avoid. It's her job to make sure the black community gets nothing but persecuted. And it's bootlicks like Roly-Poly and Al Sharpton's job to convince anyone dumb enough to listen that she's not doing that. This shows exactly why the economy's in the shape it's in. Look at how ineptly Kamala handled her own campaign finances. She spent millions and millions of dollars on these worthless shills and plants and losers, and went from having $1 billion in her campaign fund to now being millions and millions of dollars in debt, with nothing to show for it. And this is the final verdict on Roland Martin, or for the shea butter bootlicks out there who want to pretend that anyone ever listened to this guy. Kamala paid all that money to these chumps to lose an election. This is the most expensive political defeat in human history. And this is part of why you got the white media out there saying the Democrats need to get themselves a new media strategy. They need an online strategy. Kamala Harris was talking to these idiots online. She was already talking to them. The problem is she didn't want to answer any questions. And there's enough people now who've gotten to the point where they can see through the scam. You're not going to sit there and BS your way through these interviews unless you choose people who will let you. That's the problem she's actually having. It's not that she doesn't have any sort of online presence or that the Democrats don't have an online presence. The problem is there's a critical mass of people now who understand when they're being blathered at and when they're actually having their questions answered. and you can't get away with it like you used to. The monopoly's been broken. Sure, you can go ahead and try to limit all of your online discussions and interviews, quote unquote, to the Roland Martins and the Al Sharptons and the shea butter bootlicks like the Shade Room and others, but these sock puppets have no credibility. Everybody sees right through them. Everyone can see that the only reason that they're there is so that they can set up one softball after the next and give you a chance to give your old stale stump speech, and you get to go ahead and recite it word by word and line by line. Now that's the kind of thing that people don't like even when the economy's good, and they have zero patience for it when the economy's bad. Now there's also another lesson that needs to be learned here. You can't run from your problems. Kamala Harris was terrified to talk to the black media precisely because she knew we would bring the black voters' demands to her, and her entire MO has been to blather and try to BS her way past the voters with a ton of word salad. Black media would never let her do that. So she stuck to these bought and paid for, politically reliable shills who she knew from the jump would play along with her lies, ask no tough questions, and make no demands. She stuck to the roly-polies and the Shade Rooms and the Al Sharptons. These fools only talk to the baby boomers who are dying out, and the shea butter crowd who, thank God, are few in number and even fewer in intelligence. And they talk to these irrelevant little niches who have no influence and can't do anything for them. But it's all about manufacturing optics. That's what the real goal is. Kamala can sit in front of Al Sharpton, and then her white handlers can put out a press release or send out a ton of emails to their white online contacts, falsely claiming that Kamala sat down and talked with the black community with some black figures, or some dudes in a barber shop at best. They tried all that pandering garbage, all of that stuff where they're going to manufacture their optics because they were terrified to actually have to step into the ring with black folks and hear the demands. And what did all of this obfuscation and dodging the issue get her? A smaller share of the black vote than Biden, Hillary, or Obama. This has never been about winning elections to these people. It's always been about maintaining control. That is the American racial order. For them, the threat isn't the orange man winning the election. The only threat is black people's demands becoming a reality. These Negroes you see are high profile because white power made them high profile. And this is the reason why. When you see them on TV, understand it's because white power wants them there. Roly, Sharpton, Oprah, and any of these other bottom feeders who crawl on their bellies for a few crumbs, you see how little influence you've got. This was the test. Not only did you not help Kamala Harris, you contributed to one of the worst political beatdowns ever. Kamala should have won this election walking away, should have been a cakewalk. But she has no policies. She was a horrible communicator, and she surrounded herself with more zeros than Pearl Harbor. She put these Negroes on the payroll, and they were promising her that they could pull in all these black votes. But the only thing they pulled was the wool over her beady little eyes. So take a bow, bootlicks. A fool and her money never should have been together in the first place, so I have no sympathy for Kamala at all. But that's not to say you bootlicks deserve anything other than our full contempt. As I've always said, the white media can give you a platform, but they can't give you legitimacy. That's why you clowns couldn't produce anything for Kamala. Nobody listens to you. Sure, you may have gotten that little old bag, but you and Kamala found out the hard way. Money can buy you endorsements, but it can't buy you credibility. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Starlet Thompson, Jacques Hargett, Tomorrow Boyd, Argentria Harden, and Reasonable Dude. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.